Today we will be doing a dramatic reading of P is for Topless, written by Bison. That name sounds familiar. Oh yeah, I wrote this. For some reason, this is my most successful story, even though I consider it to be utter shit. Much like my most successful videos. Anyway, here's a brief reasoning of why I wrote this. I couldn't help but notice that Pinkie Pie was topless in Rainbow Falls, and as hot as picturing her humanized topless cheerleading, it ended up just being more funnier than sexy every time I pictured it. Now, let's see if I can one-take this. I highly doubt it. Chapter 1. It's Not Streaking If. She'd gotten in a small bit of practice before the train ride. This was her first, and probably only, gig as a cheerleader. It was the perfect job for her. Cheer on her friends, entertain a crowd, and just generally have a good time. She twiddled her thumbs as the train slowly crept up the mountain. She was so close, but she couldn't help but think there was something she was forgetting. Twilight had always told her to make lists of everything she needed to do for something, whether it was making a cake or cheerleading. But why bother? She knew all the ingredients in a cake, so surely she could remember what to do to be the bestest cheerer she could be. As she finally finished putting on her uniform that Rarity had so graciously made for her, she checked herself over. Rainbow... Yeah, I'm not doing the voice. Rainbow socks? Check. Rainbow shoes? Check. Rainbow wig? Save that for a bit later in case I need to crank it up to 12. Because 11 was her standard. Rainbow skirt? Check. Rainbow undies? Tee-hee! Check. She giggled, lifting her skirt up. I think that's everything. Without a second's hesitation, she bounded out of the change room and into the train's cabin, skipping along, as always, towards her seat and her pom-poms. All eyes were on her as she bounced around the train. She then tumbled forward and flipped onto her back as the train began to slow. She lay there laughing at herself for a few seconds before jumping onto her feet in one swift motion. "Alright, girls, let's go!" she cheered as she leapt out of the train. Though she couldn't help but think she was forgetting something. She just couldn't remember what it was off the top of her head. Off the top, she thought to herself. And it's time to hopefully impersonate Fluttershy's voice. Oh my god, that's horrible. Rarity? No. Let's just forget this happened. Rarity? Fluttershy asked. The uniforms you made for us have shirts, right? She added without even looking at Rarity, instead keeping her eyes trained on Pinkie running topless out into the crowd. Her breasts were just bouncing all over the place as she did. Pinkie then stopped mid-leap and mid-air and gasped loudly. She raised her hands up into her chest and gasped loudly, which is... well, it's accurate, but it's kind of redundant. Which only attracted more attention towards her. She turned and sprinted towards the train as fast as she could. "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed!" she half cried as she entered. Her hands up against her neck, arms covered her breasts. She quickly went over to her seat and rummaged through her bag before she found what she was looking for and slipped it over her head and onto her shoulders. And I ran out of breath there. Edit that out. How could I forget to wear my horn? And with that, she blew into the instrument and ran back outside. They all just kept looking as their friend raced through the crowd, all eyes on her. Fluttershy didn't even hear Rarity say, "Yes, she has a blouse. I'm afraid that's just Pinkie being Pinkie." "So, Twilight," Rainbow Dash spoke up, after wiping the drool away from her mouth. "You're cheering for me like that too, huh? It'd be a shame if my cheer squad's uniforms didn't match," she said, wiggling her eyebrows and doing the face. Twilight, however, was still looking at Pinkie, giving a face of her own. "Meanwhile, out in the crowd..." There was more than just the relay tryouts going on today. The jousting tryouts were in full swing, as were Pinkie's tits. As she ran past, numerous sounds could be heard coming from the men wearing jousting armors, as well as from one oddly buff woman. Ding! She then continued on towards her destination, the relay tryouts. Spitfire and No-Name Blue Jerkface, the two female members of the team, were slack-jawed as they saw the girl jumping through the crowd, her boobs bouncing up and down, not even in sync, one going up while the other went down. And Soren didn't even give a buck. Spitfire whispered something to You fuck you too, bleeping console! Damn you, Xbox. I'm gonna keep going. Where was I? Spitfire whispered something to What's-Her-Face before activating Wonder Douche sunglasses and went over to him. Jeez, Soren, there's a hot girl over there running around topless, Spitfire told him. For the sake of the Wonderbolts, could you at least look at her and pretend not to be gay? She snickered at her teammate's expense. Who, what? Her? Oh yeah, she's hot, Soren replied nervously. He wasn't gay. He just slept with this guy named Brayburn once. Maybe twice. Maybe a lot. Maybe last night. And this morning. He made the best pies. Still wearing her shades, Spitfire turned to Pinkie off in the distance and bit her lip. Soren looked at Pinkie Pie too and tried to copy Spitfire's face. It didn't end well. They just laughed at him. He had to do something about this. Soren came up with a plan. He'd pretend to get distracted by a hot chick and injure himself during the practice while everyone was watching him. That'll prove he's straight. One fake injury later, not to mention a real one because Soren's a complete idiot who managed to actually hurt himself while faking an injury, Rainbow Dash and her team had successfully qualified for the Equestria Games. In celebration, all of them, including Derpy for some reason, took a photo together in which Pinkie basically pulled Snowflake's face right into her tits. He visibly strained to control himself. It had been a long day and Pinkie was exhausted. She'd had to compete for attention with the cheerleaders from Cloudesdale. One of them wasn't even wearing panties. Who does that? Every time she did a cartwheel or did the splits. But for now, the day was over. She was slightly sad that it was over, but happy that she would get to cheer for her friends again in episode 25. I bet $10 the season ends at the Equestria Games. Before shit goes down in episode 26. That was amazing, you guys! Rainbow Dash cheered. She was totally stoked about her win. She put her arm around both Pinkie and Twilight's shoulders. Would have been better though if my cheer squad had the same uniform. But oh well, can't have everything, she said as her hand slowly slid down, heading towards the two's breasts. Twilight was about to pull away and cockblock, or whatever you do to a girl, Rainbow Dash's advances when Pinkie Pie spoke up. What do you mean the same? We're wearing matching uniforms, she said, looking Twilight up and down, noticing Dash's hand had found its target, then looking at herself, her own shoes, socks, and skirt. I mean, sure, I have dreadlocks and Twilight looks like the nanny, but other than that, we're dressed the same, she announced in slight confusion, and was met by equally confused looks on her friends' faces. Pinkie Pie? Rarity said. She walked over to and past Pinkie to her friend's bag and went through it for a second before pulling out Pinkie Pie's top and showing it to her. Pinkie just stared at the shirt for a moment before her eyes widened. She broke away from Dash's arms and headed towards the window. It was dark outside and she was able to see her own reflection quite clearly. She continued to stare at herself, remembering everything that had happened today. Why didn't you tell me? She pouted. Well, dear, we just thought that... What Pinkie Pie saw in her reflection was a red-headed girl wearing a bagpipe on her head, a kilted skirt, and no top on. I never knew. Why didn't you tell me I was Scottish? The end. Author's note. I seriously think she looks Scottish in this picture. Twilight was always telling... What? Okay, that's a typo. Should edit that. Twilight had always told. Yeah, that works. Alright, let's try that again. Yes, darling. Yes, darling. Why does that sound British? Fuck Rarity, worst pony.